Sometimes the most powerful love doesn't come to rescue you. It comes to remind you that you were never too broken to be chosen. Lennox Vaughn did not chase women. He never needed to. They came to him in waves, supermodels, actresses, heiresses. They all smiled the same way, walked the same way, talked with the same breathless need to please him. But none of them ever lasted, not one. In the world of the ultra-wealthy, he was a phantom myth. Ruthless in business, merciless in bed. It was whispered in elite circles that sleeping with Lennox Vaughn was like standing too close to a fire. Beautiful at first until it scorched you. Some said he was too much. Others claimed he was empty inside. But they all agreed on one thing. No woman had ever satisfied him. He would take them out, wind them, strip them down, learn every inch of their skin. Then just as quickly, he would vanish. No explanation, no closure. They left with bruised egos and trembling memories. He never looked back. He never called twice. To the public, he was a visionary tycoon. CEO of Von Lux, the world's fastest-growing chain of luxury hotels and private resorts. To women, he was an untouchable conquest, a test they all failed. And Lennox knew it. He carried himself like a man who had seen it all, done it all, and found nothing worth holding on to. Tall, sharply dressed, with storm-gray eyes and a jawline chiseled by defiance. His voice was low, precise, dangerous. He rarely smiled. And when he did, it came with a warning. But everything changed the moment she walked in. It wasn't in a ballroom. It wasn't at a party full of flashing lights and champagne. No. She entered through the back of a modest church hall during a scholarship banquet he barely agreed to attend. A room full of young students and well-meaning faculty. Lennox had intended to give his speech, shake a few hands, and leave before dessert. Then she stepped into the room. She did not announce herself. She did not wear red lips or glittering heels. She wore a simple navy blue dress that clung to her modestly. Her hair was pulled into a low bun, and her eyes. Those eyes did not flinch when they met his. Her name was Eden Carter. And in a world that adored him for the wrong reasons, she looked at him like she saw something he had forgotten was even there. She didn't smile to impress him. She didn't speak like she needed him to notice her. She walked past him with a presence that screamed grace and softness and discipline, and Lennox could not look away. He was a man who had devoured desire and grown bored of it. A man who had built skyscrapers and burned through hearts. But in that moment, none of it mattered, because Eden Carter was something he had never tasted. She was calm, unshaken, unavailable in all the ways that stirred something deep in him. And the most dangerous part, she had no idea who he was, no idea the storm he carried behind his tailored suits. No idea that she had just stepped into the line of fire of a man who destroyed everything he touched. But the way she held her shoulders, the way she carried silence like a shield, Lennox Vaughn knew instantly. This girl was not like the others. And for the first time in years, he didn't want to walk away. He wanted to stay, even if it ruined him. Eden Carter had spent her entire life being good daughter, good student, good Christian. She was the kind of young woman who never needed to be reminded of the rules because they lived inside her like scripture. Her father, Pastor Elijah Carter, was a respected voice across New Orleans. A man of wisdom, grace, and unwavering conviction. For years he had preached sermons about purity, obedience, and the dangers of the world beyond the church doors. Eden was his pride. his living example that you could be holy and whole in a broken world. But Eden had her own thoughts, quiet ones, questions she never asked out loud, feelings she buried under study guides, choir practice, and polite smiles. At 20, Eden was in her third year of studying psychology. Her dream was to open a counseling center for young women in crisis, a safe place for those who had no one. She knew pain. She had grown up watching her father grieve the loss of her mother. She had seen women walk into their church with bruises they wouldn't explain. She had watched people pretend to be okay for the sake of appearances. Eden did not want to pretend. She wanted to understand. She wanted to help. Her world, however, was small. School, church, home, repeat. She did not go to clubs. She had never been kissed. Her closest thing to rebellion was writing unsent letters in her journal. Letters addressed to no one, filled with all the words she couldn't say out loud. That night at the scholarship banquet, she had not expected anything more than a handshake and a free dinner. She had been selected as one of 5 recipients of the Von Lux Opportunity Grant, a scholarship for underrepresented students with community service experience. She didn't know who Lennox Vaughn was beyond the name printed at the bottom of her award letter. But the moment she entered the church hall and felt the silence that fell around her, she knew someone important had arrived. He stood across the room, tall and severe in a black suit, speaking quietly to a group of school board members. His presence shifted the atmosphere like thunderclouds before a storm. And yet when his eyes landed on her, everything paused. Eden had not worn makeup. Her dress was simple. She hadn't even worn heels, but something about the way she held herself caught his attention. And the strangest part was that she noticed him too. Not for his wealth or reputation, but for the way he didn't quite fit in even as the guest of honor. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, until he saw her. After the event, when she stepped outside to wait for her rideshare, the last thing she expected was for him to be there standing beside a sleek black SUV. He spoke first. His voice was deeper than she imagined. Calm, polished, intriguing. He introduced himself. She blinked, recognizing the name from her scholarship letter. He thanked her for being part of the program. She thanked him for the opportunity. The exchange was short, polite, but the way he watched her walk away lingered in her mind for days. Back in his world, Lennox didn't understand why her face wouldn't leave his thoughts. He had met hundreds of women, more glamorous, more experienced, more willing. But Eden was different. She didn't want anything from him. That confused him. It also challenged him. He told himself it was nothing. A passing interest. A strange blip in a life too full for distractions. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw her again. Her soft brown skin. Her quiet strength. Her eyes that did not flinch. In New Orleans, Eden returned to her usual routines. But something had shifted. A curiosity had been awakened inside her. Not because of his money, not because of his fame, but because she had seen something in his eyes. A loneliness that looked too familiar. She did not tell her father about the man outside the church. She didn't write about him in her journal. But in the quiet of night, she remembered the way he said her name, like it meant something. Eden, simple, whole, untouched, and suddenly her world didn't feel so small anymore. It began with a message. Just 4 days after the banquet, Eden received an email from the Von Lux Foundation, thanking her again for her participation. At the bottom was a personal note. Eden, I hope your semester is going well. I would like to treat you to coffee sometime this week, if your schedule allows. No expectations, just a conversation. Best, Lennox Vaughn. She stared at it for several minutes before closing her laptop. It sat with her like a question she wasn't ready to answer. She didn't reply immediately. She told herself it was unwise, unnecessary. She didn't know this man, and everything she had been taught warned her against this type of invitation. But the curiosity didn't go away. That night she knelt beside her bed to pray, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the way he looked at her. Not like a man trying to own her, but like someone who saw her for something more than just her appearance. The next morning she replied, "Thursday afternoon works. I have class until 3. There's a small cafe near Jackson Square. It's quiet, lighter than Starbucks. Eden." Thursday arrived quickly. She wore a cream blouse and loose jeans hair in soft curls that framed her face. When she walked into the cafe, he was already there, seated at a corner table with his phone face down and a cup of black coffee untouched in front of him. He stood when she approached, offering a quiet smile. "Thank you for coming. You didn't have to." "I know, that's why I did." Their conversation began politely. He asked about her classes, her family, her goals. She answered cautiously but honestly. He listened more than he spoke. She noticed that. He didn't try to dominate the space. He didn't interrupt. And when he asked questions, they weren't shallow. He asked what made her want to study psychology. She told him about her mother's quiet sadness before she passed, about the women who came to their church looking for something they couldn't name. He said nothing for a long moment. Then, with a rare softness in his voice, he said, "I admire that. Most people chase money or recognition. You chase understanding." She didn't know how to respond to that, so she smiled and looked down at her cup. And when she looked up, he was still watching her. They met again the following week, then again. Each time felt like the kind of moment people forget to write down, but never forget. They didn't hold hands, they didn't flirt, but there was something in the way they talked that felt like a secret. He started opening up, little by little. Lennox talked about his childhood in pieces, never full paragraphs. He had grown up in foster homes. His mother had left. He never met his father. He was angry for a long time, then numb, then rich. He didn't trust people easily. He had learned that charm was currency and silence was protection. She listened without judgment, and when she looked at him, he felt something stir in his chest that terrified him. Because it was not desire, it was recognition. She reminded him of something he used to believe in, a life before walls, a time before masks. After their 5th meeting, he asked if she wanted to take a walk by the river. She agreed. The wind was light, the sky overcast, and the city buzzed in the background like a soft hum. They walked side by side without touching. "You're different, Eden. That's a compliment, right?" "It's the only kind I know how to give." She laughed lightly, then asked, "And you? What do people usually think of you?" He paused. "Dangerous, cold, unreachable. Are they right?" He stopped walking, looked at her. "Depends on what part of me they meet." She met his eyes then, and for a moment there was no noise, just two people in the quiet, two histories wrapped in questions. "Why me?" she asked. "Why are you spending time with me? Because I don't know how not to." He took a breath. "Eden, you calm me. I didn't even know I needed that until I met you." She looked away, unsure of how to carry what he just said. She wasn't used to being someone's safe space. She was used to being protected, not the protector. But with him, something reversed. Later that night, she wrote in her journal, "He looks at me like I'm an answer, but I don't even know the question." A few days later, he invited her to dinner. Not at a restaurant, at his private rooftop suite in the heart of the city. She hesitated before saying yes. When she arrived, there were no servers, no waiters, just him in a navy sweater and dark jeans cooking pasta in a sleek open kitchen. "You cook?" she asked, surprised. "Sometimes. It slows my mind." They ate by candlelight under the stars. She told him about her favorite books. He told her about the one time he almost left everything behind. After dinner, he walked her to the balcony. The city sparkled beneath them. And then slowly, carefully, he reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. He didn't speak, just held her hand gently, as if testing the idea that something this simple could feel that powerful. "Eden." His voice was barely a whisper. "I haven't touched you until now, but you've been touching something in me since the first moment I saw you." She looked at him, her heart thudding, then said, "You don't scare me, Lennox. Maybe that's what scares me." They stood there in silence, hand in hand, the wind brushing past them, both of them, knowing this was not just a beginning, it was a surrender, and neither of them were ready for what would come next. It was the first time Lennox had let someone close enough to see the cracks. With every woman before Eden, there had been distance control roles to play. He was the provider, the protector, the cold flame they wanted to warm their hands by. But Eden had no script. She did not ask for gifts. She didn't care for his wealth. She only cared to understand. And Lennox found himself slipping into a space he had forgotten how to occupy. Vulnerability. It started slowly. A story here, a memory there. Little windows into a past he had spent years locking away. He told her about the first night he slept on the floor of a group home, sharing a room with 4 other boys. He was 7. He remembered the way one of them cried in the dark every night, and how no one ever asked why. He told her about his first job bussing tables at 13, the man who gave him a chance, and the first paycheck that made him feel like he could own something, even if it was just his pride. Eden listened. She never interrupted, never pitied. And in her eyes he saw a kind of safety he didn't know how to name. She made silence feel full. She made questions feel soft, but not everything was peaceful. One evening as they sat beneath the willow trees near the old city park, she asked him something she had been holding for weeks. "Why do you always look like you're waiting for something to go wrong?" He didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened. Then he spoke. "Because everything I ever wanted, I lost. And the few things I've kept, I had to fight like hell for. I don't believe in permanence." She watched him, her voice barely a whisper. "And me? Am I something you expect to lose too?" He turned toward her, eyes stormy. "You're something I never expected at all. That scares me more than losing you." Days passed and their bond deepened. But Eden knew her world, and his would never fit easily together. Her father had started to ask questions. "Where are you going so often? Who's this new friend of yours?" She answered vaguely, knowing full well that if she told him the truth, he would react with fear, maybe even disappointment. The daughter of a pastor, spending time with a billionaire who had made headlines for his ruthless acquisitions and endless affairs. It was a recipe for heartbreak, and yet she couldn't walk away. She didn't want to. One afternoon, she invited Lennox to attend a community fundraiser at her church. It was low-key, no press, no suits, just family's food and a choir. He arrived late wearing a black button-up and jeans blending in just enough. When Eden introduced him to her father, Pastor Elijah gave him a firm handshake and eyes that measured everything. Lennox held his ground, respectful but unreadable. After the event, as they stood outside near the steps, her father pulled her aside. "He's not like the boys you grew up with, I can see that. And I need you to remember who you are, Eden, and whose you are." She nodded but didn't promise anything. That night, she and Lennox sat in her car parked near the levee, the city lights reflecting in the water. He was quiet. She could feel him retreating. "What is it?" she asked. He exhaled, leaning his head back. "You're so good, Eden, so untouched by the world. I keep waiting for you to realize I'm not what you need." She reached over, placed a hand over his. "Then let me decide what I need." He turned to her eyes, searching. "You don't know the things I've done, the things I still carry. Then show me, Lennox. I'm not afraid of the dark." He closed his eyes as if bracing for impact. Then slowly he began to speak. About the woman who once told him she loved him only to sell a story to the tabloids a week later. About the betrayal of friends who only saw him as a bank account. About the day he found his mother's name on a list of addicts in a public health report. She was still alive, but she had never come back. He spoke until his voice broke, and Eden sat beside him, never moving, never flinching. When he finished, she didn't try to fix him. She didn't say it would be okay. She simply leaned over and pressed her forehead to his. "I see you, Lennox. The real you, not the CEO, not the legend, just the man. And I don't want to run." He opened his eyes, and for the first time in years, they were wet. He didn't know how to thank her. He didn't know how to deserve her. But in that moment, he knew one thing with absolute clarity. He didn't want to lose her. That night, as she lay in bed, Eden wrote only one line in her journal. "I'm not falling for his power. I'm falling for his pain." And across the city, in the penthouse suite that once felt too big for one soul, Lennox stood at the window, her words echoing in his mind. "Let me decide what I need," he whispered to himself, "like a vow, I need you." The shift happened so subtly, neither of them saw it coming. What began as soft moments and shared truths started to blur into something deeper, heavier, and more dangerous. Lennox had never let anyone linger this long in his life. With Eden, he felt exposed in ways that were both terrifying and addictive. She had touched a part of him no one else had dared to reach, and now that she was there, he didn't know how to live without her. But love for him had never come without consequences. And soon the walls he had spent years building began to crack under the weight of everything she stirred in him. It started with the media. A tabloid had published a blurry photo of them leaving a jazz club one evening. The headline wasn't cruel, but the implication was loud. Billionaire's new flame church girl, or just another name on the list. Eden saw it before he did. She stared at her phone, her breath caught between offense and disbelief. It wasn't just about her image. It was about the life she had spent years building. Her father's reputation, the trust of her community, the expectations that came with being Eden Carter. Lennox tried to get ahead of it. He called in favors, paid to bury the story. But damage has a way of echoing louder than silence. Her father found out. His face when he confronted her wasn't angry. It was disappointed. You've been seeing him behind my back, behind the church's back. She tried to explain, tried to make him see who Lennox really was beneath the headlines. But her father couldn't separate the man from the myth. This isn't just about you, Eden. It's about what you represent, about what we've stood for all these years. Do you love him? She froze. The question hung between them like a verdict. I don't know. I just know I don't want to stop. Her father stepped back, wounded. Then you already have. Eden walked out of the house that night with her chest aching and her mind in pieces. She drove for hours before ending up at Lennox's penthouse, tears still on her cheeks. When he opened the door and saw her face, something in him broke. She stepped inside without a word and collapsed into his arms. For the first time, she let herself fall apart. He held her in silence, knowing exactly what she had lost. And in that moment, he made a decision, one that would cost him everything. The next morning, she woke up in his bed, fully clothed, wrapped in blankets, his jacket still around her shoulders. He was sitting at the edge of the room, staring out the window. When she stirred, he turned to her, expression unreadable. I need to tell you something. She sat up slowly, heart already sinking. I'm going away for a while, just a few weeks. There's a new property launching in Dubai. It's important. She looked at him, feeling something shift. You're leaving because of me. He didn't answer. His silence was the answer. You said you wanted this. You said I calmed you. I still do. But I also see what this is doing to you, to your family. I never wanted to be the reason your life unraveled. You're not. This is my choice. I know. And this is mine. She didn't cry. She just stared at him, eyes wide and heart wide open. Will you come back? I don't know. I need space to think, to breathe. Eden stood every step heavy. She walked to him, reached for his hand. He let her hold it for a long time. Then he let go. No promises were made, no kiss, just silence, heavy and final. He left that afternoon. No driver, no entourage, just him and a suitcase, and the echo of what they almost became. Eden didn't go home. She stayed with a friend near campus. She couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Everything felt unfinished, unspoken. She wanted to call him, but she didn't. She waited and waited. Days turned into weeks. A letter arrived from her father, short, formal. We forgive, but we do not forget. Come home when you're ready to remember who you are. Eden folded it and placed it in the back of her Bible, the very place she had hidden all her questions. Meanwhile, Lennox buried himself in work. But even in Dubai, under the glare of skylines and boardrooms, her voice haunted him. Let me decide what I need. Every night he stared at his phone, hovering over her name, then closing it again. He told himself it was better this way, that she would be safer without him, but his chest said otherwise. 2 weeks became 4, then 6. And then one afternoon, as he sat in a private lounge, overlooking the ocean, his assistant approached quietly. Sir, there's someone here to see you. A pause. She says her name is Eden. Lennox stood so fast the chair scraped back. When he turned the corner, there she was, in a soft green dress, hair loose around her shoulders, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. She had flown across the world for one reason. You left without saying goodbye. I didn't know how, so I'll help you. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. Goodbye is not what I need. What I need is honesty. What I need is the man who held me when the world fell apart. What I need is the truth. Lennox looked at her, his heart in his throat. The truth is, I'm in love with you, but I don't know how to love right. Then let me show you how, not with perfection, with presence. He reached for her then, and she didn't hesitate. The kiss was not passionate in the way tabloids described. It was deep, slow, full of fear and surrender and hope. And in that moment, Lennox Vaughn let go of everything he thought love was supposed to be, and held on to what it actually was. Real love doesn't announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives quietly in a hotel lobby half a world away, carried by the soft steps of a woman who refuses to be forgotten. For Lennox and Eden, what followed wasn't a fairy tale. It was slow, deliberate, messy. He stayed in Dubai another week, but this time Eden stayed with him. Not in secret, not in the shadows. She sat beside him in meetings, asked questions about his designs, his choices, the way he used light and space to influence how people felt. She challenged him with gentleness. Why is everything in black and glass? Because it's clean. It's distant. It protects. Maybe it's time to design something that invites people in. He looked at her, then realizing she wasn't just teaching him how to love. She was teaching him how to live. They flew back to New Orleans together. No one welcomed her with open arms. Not her father, not her church, but she didn't expect them to. Healing wasn't instant, it was earned. Slowly, Eden returned to her studies. She spoke to women at her church about love and identity. Some disapproved, others listened, and quietly, one by one, hearts began to open. Lennox moved differently too. He sold his apartment in the sky and bought a historic home near the bayou. It was smaller, warmer, a space he could breathe in. He didn't fill it with marble. He filled it with art, with sunlight, with silence that didn't feel lonely anymore. He stopped chasing power, started chasing meaning, and in Eden he found both. But love doesn't grow without trials. And just when they thought the hardest part was behind them, life reminded them it always had one more test to offer. Eden was offered a fellowship, 1 year abroad, Geneva, a chance to study trauma recovery with a world-renowned program. Her dream. She found the letter on a Tuesday morning, hands trembling as she read. Lennox saw the look on her face and knew instantly. "You have to go," he said before she even opened her mouth. "But I don't want to leave you. Want and need are not always the same. I know this is what you were made for." She sat down beside him, eyes already glistening. "I'm scared, so am I. But I'd rather miss you for 1 year than hold you back for a lifetime." They agreed not to make promises they couldn't keep. No ultimatums, no pressure, just love, held loosely, chosen freely. The night before she left, they sat under the stars in his backyard, wrapped in a single blanket. He kissed her forehead and said, "I won't ask you to wait for me, but I'll wait for you anyway." And she whispered back, "I'll come home with more stories, but still, the same heart." The goodbye at the airport wasn't loud, no tears, just a long embrace. 2 hands holding on for a few more seconds, and eyes that said everything words couldn't. Eden left, and the months that followed tested everything they had built. Long-distance love was not glamorous. It was missed calls, time zone gaps, blurry video chats, and lonely nights. But it was also handwritten letters, surprise deliveries, and the sound of each other's voices saying, "I'm still here." Lennox changed more in her absence than even she realized. He started a foundation for at-risk youth, partnering with the foster care system he once hated. He began therapy, real therapy. He looked his childhood in the face and stopped running. He stopped needing to be the untouchable man. and began becoming a whole one. Eden thrived too. She dove into her studies, shared her own story for the first time in a conference hall full of strangers, and realized that love doesn't make you smaller, it makes you brave. When the year was up, she didn't call. She flew home unannounced, landing on a Sunday afternoon. Lennox was in his garden, dirt on his hands, sun on his face, when he heard her voice. That flower's dying. He turned so fast his heart skipped. She stood at the gate, smiling like the sun. He dropped the hose and walked to her in 3 long steps, wrapping her in his arms like gravity had finally done its job. "You came back. I promised I would." He pulled back to look at her. "You're different, stronger. So are you." He took a deep breath. "Stay with me. I'm not asking for a fairy tale, just real." She looked up at him, her eyes soft and steady. "Then let's build something honest, from scratch, from roots, from this." That night they danced barefoot in the kitchen, laughter echoing against brick walls and hardwood floors. And when he kissed her, it wasn't like the first time. It was deeper, not because of passion, but because of everything they had survived to get back to this moment. Love isn't a rescue mission, it's a return. And Eden had come home. The morning light filtered through linen curtains, casting soft golden patterns across the wooden floor. The house was quiet, except for the sound of slow footsteps and a tea kettle beginning to hum. Eden stood in the kitchen barefoot in one of Lennox's oversized shirts, her hair tied in a loose knot, a journal open in front of her. She wasn't writing, just thinking, just feeling. Upstairs, Lennox was still asleep, one arm draped across the space where she used to lie before she slipped away to start the day. For the first time in a long time, peace didn't feel borrowed. It felt earned. Their love hadn't been born out of perfection. It had been tested, stretched, nearly broken, but it had held. Not because it was easy, but because they had chosen it, again and again. Eden looked around the space they now called home. On the wall hung a framed photo of her late mother. Below it, a bookshelf filled with psychology texts and memoirs and faith-based journals. Next to it, a leather armchair Lennox swore was too ugly until she sat in it. On the counter, fresh flowers. Every Friday, he brought her a new bouquet, not because he had to, because he remembered what kind she liked. The small things, the quiet things, that was what their love had become. No more chasing, no more proving, just staying, showing up. She turned a page in her journal and wrote one sentence. "He doesn't save me, he meets me." Behind her, the floor creaked. Lennox walked in hair-messy eyes still soft with sleep. He kissed her shoulder without saying a word and poured himself coffee. "Morning," she said, smiling. "Morning," he echoed, then looked at her. "You okay?" She nodded, just grateful. He reached out and took her hand across the counter. "I used to think love meant giving someone the best version of you. Now I think it means giving them the truest one." She squeezed his fingers. "You've always been enough, Lennox, even when you didn't believe it." He let out a breath. "I still have days when I struggle. So do I. But now we don't have to do it alone." They stood there in that kitchen, surrounded by the ordinary beauty of a life they had built brick by brick, choice by choice. It wasn't loud. It wasn't shiny, but it was real. And that was more than either of them had ever hoped for. Later that afternoon, they drove out to the edge of the city where Eden had begun construction on her women's counseling center. Lennox had funded the land but insisted the name be hers. Eden Haven, a place for healing, a place for beginnings. As they stood before the unfinished structure, he wrapped his arm around her waist. "I'm proud of you," he said. She smiled. "I'm proud of us." He kissed her temple. "I love you." She rested her head against his chest. "I know, and I love you back, fully, freely, finally." The sun dipped low as they stood in silence, the wind brushing past them like a whisper. For two people who had once lived on opposite ends of the world, both emotionally and physically, they had found their way to something solid, something whole. Not because fate had handed it to them, but because they had stayed long enough to let love do the hard work of transformation. And in that stillness, with dust on their shoes and hope in their bones, they knew they had made it home. Some people spend their lives searching for a love that feels like fire, something fast, hot, impossible to hold. But Eden and Lennox had learned that real love doesn't burn. It warms, it waits, it stays. It does not roar, it listens, it sees, it endures. Their story wasn't built on perfection, it was built on redemption. On two people who had every reason to run but chose to stay, chose to do the hard work of healing, chose to see the best in each other when the world only saw the worst. Eden had given him something no woman ever had. Not her body, not her attention, but her belief, the belief that he could be more than his reputation, more than his pain, more than the shadow he had become. And Lennox, in return, had offered something even rarer, safety. He never tried to mold her into something else. He didn't try to control her, he let her become. Let her grow, let her lead, because he had finally understood that strength wasn't in domination. It was in devotion, in presence, in the quiet decision to choose someone every day, even when it wasn't easy, especially then. Months passed, then a year, then two, and with every season their love deepened. It didn't look like the stories in magazines. There were no extravagant proposals, no grand displays. But there were notes left on bathroom mirrors, soup on sick days, laughter during midnight grocery runs, forgiveness after hard conversations. And every morning without fail, Lennox reached across the bed and held her hand. A reminder, I'm still here. One evening as they sat on their front porch watching the rain, Eden turned to him and asked, "Do you remember the first thing you ever said to me?" He smiled. No expectations, just a conversation. She laughed softly. "And look where that conversation took us." He nodded. "You were the one thing I never saw coming, and the only thing I never wanted to lose." She leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the scent of him, steady and familiar. "Do you still believe no woman could ever satisfy you?" He looked at her, then his voice a low whisper. "No. I just hadn't met the one who knew I needed more than pleasure. I needed peace. You gave me that. You gave me home." She closed her eyes. "And you gave me freedom to choose, to feel, to live." For a long time, they sat there in silence, the kind that doesn't beg to be filled, just held, just honored, and in that stillness, Lennox knew that every storm he had walked through, every wall he had built, had all been leading him to her. Not to fix him, not to save him, but to walk beside him, as equal, as partner, as grace. Some people think love is a destination, but they had learned it was a decision, made daily, with hands open and hearts willing, and in the soft echo of a life well chosen, one truth rose above all others. No woman had ever satisfied Lennox Vaughn until the pastor's daughter walked in and stayed, not because she had to, but because he finally gave her a reason to.